A shocking new report says right-wing extremist groups have gained even more support in the USA over the last year, fueled in part by anger over the troubled economy, the nation's first black president, and immigration issues. It's raising concerns over a potential rise in anti-government violence, like that deadly attack on an IRS building in Texas last week. I'm joined by Mark Potok of the Southern Poverty Law Center, the author of the annual report, Rage on the Right. What stands out to you this year in terms of these groups who are truly angry at the way they see the government acting?
Really, what stands out the most is just the scope of the thing. I mean, there has been an enormous growth in groups on the radical right of all kinds in the last year. You know, when we look at the whole picture, though, the most astounding growth has come in the so-called patriot groups, the militias that all of us remember from the 1990s. You know, these groups had very largely, if not disappeared, at least gone quiescent. But what we found was 363 new groups in the last year. That's a 244% increase in a single year. And at the same time, we saw a lot of growth in other types of radical groups.
All right, but so
it's been quite astounding.
When you're talking patriot groups, I mean, are these just pro-America groups? What is it about them that concerns you in terms of the threat they represent against America?
Well, the self-named patriot movement is really the movement of which the paramilitary wing was the militias. So, you know, basically the patriot movement is a movement that sees the federal government as its primary enemy and believes that the government is involved in all kinds of nefarious plots to bring us into the New World Order, so-called, and so on. And, you know, while it may sound like a benign set of beliefs, the reality is that the Patriot movement back in the 1990s produced an enormous amount of criminal violence, all kinds of plots and so on, and really all based on these conspiracy theories about what the government was up to. Joseph Stack, the man who flew the plane into the IRS building in Austin, is an example of those kinds of beliefs. Many so-called patriots believe that the federal income tax is completely unconstitutional, illegal, and so on. So, you know, this movement has produced a lot of havoc.
You know, the investigators in that case, Mark, characterized that as criminal activity. But what we saw in the 1990s with Timothy McVeigh and what happened in Oklahoma City at the Murrah Federal Building was very similar, a vehicle being used to attack a government building because of anti-government extremism. Are you concerned about domestic terrorism, and are you concerned at the reluctance on the part of investigators to label these kinds of incidents terrorism?
Well, look, in the Joseph Stack case, one could argue about it because there's certainly evidence in both directions. Joseph Stack was a man, according to his kind of suicide note, who was angry at a lot of things, the Catholic Church, unions, corporations, and so on, but he kept circling back to the idea of it was the IRS and the government was the enemy. So am I concerned? Yes, I am concerned. We've seen a great deal of at least attempted domestic terrorism, I think an obvious rise over the last 12 to 18 months. A lot of that has been connected to the essentially the rise to the White House of a black man. There are many people who are angry about that, and also angry about the demographic change that definitely is occurring in this country.
Immigration.
So, you know, yes, I worry about violence.
All right. Mark, I just want to tell folks that the report itself is fascinating and eye-opening as well, and again, it's from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And thank you for having me.